Namo tassa bhagavato arahato sama sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato sama sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato sama sambuddhassa. Buddhang dhammang sanghang namasami. Hello everyone online. Welcome to our evening meeting. We're in this beautiful Dharma hall. We have about 35 yogis, 4 samanas, myself, someone from Malaysia, someone from Thailand, someone from France, among the samanas. The grounds are exquisite. It's about 28 degrees outside. There's the sound of a stream. There's a river running by this beautiful place. There are potted plants which would be exotics in Canada. What are the palms? Are they betel nut palms? No one knows. So come on. We have palm trees, yeah, betel nut palms along the pathways, and each of us is in a little chalet. Food is exquisite, lots of coffee available, so there's no suffering. It's perfect environment. So we can't. There's no one you can blame on this one. You can only look at your own mind. So we're very fortunate to be here. So for all of you, I know some of you will be in morning in Canada and some are in Singapore and other places. Um, what we're really enjoying here, this retreat, is we're really working on silence. It's quite impressive how silent everyone is and how powerful that is. So welcome to our online friends. So today is our third evening together. And so this morning I described a body meditation, and what I was trying to do there is and go back. I like to make furniture. And so usually every year I make a few pieces of furniture. This year, not so many, but I made a nice chair. And it's a chair that I want. I wanted a nice chair for the Dhamma hall so that I could sit. And I wanted a high chair because my legs are long. So to make a chair, I need a design. And then I got a design, and then I altered the design to my needs. Then I had to figure out what kind of wood. So I found some large, thick boards of oak in the workshop. And then I had to pick through that. And then I had to cut out the pieces which I thought would have a good grain. Then always a big board is warped. So I had to make 4 square edges. So I had to use a jointer, a thicknesser, and I'm sure you understand all this, a table saw, all of which run with blades at maybe 20,000 revolutions per minute. Uh, then once I had it all squared, I had to measure very, very carefully where all the joints are going to be. These are joints. So this is a mortise and tenon joint here. So you have a hole, and you have it, which is called a mortise, and you have a tongue, which is called a tenon. So all of those have to be very, very accurate. So I had to lay it out, measure it. It all has to match. Then I had to cut them out by using a plunge router, which is another very, very fast machine. And then I had to use chisel. And then I had to fit it all together. And then I had to adjust it. And then had to glue it up. And then I had to oil it, and voila. So all the time, that effort is concentration. That's why I mention this. This isn't a workshop in furniture making. I'm concerned about the object, aren't I? And if I'm not careful with those machines, I'm going to lose my fingers. And I almost did once. I put my thumb into a saw. So that kind of effort, that's what I mean by concentration for myself in terms of language. And most of life is like that, that we are concerned about the objects of experience. The Angel Group did this fabulous public health initiative up in Nan. That's all about objects. It's about doctors and vehicles and schedules and food and organizing. So it's all very, very objective. Um, but when I did this meditation this morning on body meditation, what I was trying to do, I don't know if I indicated it or not, I was trying to emphasize more the awareness rather than the object. So I said, okay, we'll do a body meditation and we'll start with just a kind of general reference, the mouth. And the language I was using is let the feelings in the mouth become conscious. So what I was encouraging wasn't concentration in the sense when I'm doing woodwork, but more like relaxing the mind, opening the mind, localizing the attention to help you just get into the present moment. But it was about awareness itself rather than the mouth. If I if 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 I go to the dentist, then it's very much about the mouth. My mouth is open, it's in pain, and all the rest of it. Here I'm taking something neutral, just sensation. I'm using that locality to indicate awareness itself. And then I went to another part of the body, didn't I? So I said, feel the ears. And then that's all just a general locality. But again, it was let the feelings in the ear become conscious. So it's about awareness again. And then I said the nose, and then I said the eyes, and then and so on and so forth. I went through the body. So for me, that's different than concentrating as I do in woodwork. It's more about, sometimes I think in Thai they say meditation is jit pak porn. Is that true? The resting of the mind is to use that kind of language. Anyway, or Luangpor Cha said the vacation of the mind. Didn't we have a retreat in Singapore? Something like that, kind of Christmas of the mind. What I'm indicating is we're not grabbing an object now and trying to prevent ourselves from thinking, which I did for a long time, but we're trying to just notice that the awareness of things is always or consciousness is always a background, and trying to actually relax into that background by using language such as receptive knowing. It's like this, and it's not about the object. And really, if I can get that across, then I feel I've done my job. And it's not a technique. Some people say, well, don't, this is the Ajahn Chah technique. You can use a technique to come to that. So you can use anapanasati, you could use a mantra, you could use your feet touching the ground, you could walk slowly, you could walk quickly, you could do push-ups. I couldn't. I'm my body is beyond push-ups, unfortunately, and so on and so forth. So it's not really a technique. I would say it's an understanding that then I try to remember in any techniques I use. So this bodily meditation is how I remember body part by body part, the awake mind. Now, this is different than trying to concentrate on sensations, which some teachers teach, which is fine. Then, it's this sensation and then that sensation and this sensation. That's not what I'm emphasizing. That's kind of arbitrary. What I'm really emphasizing is just puru, awareness. It's like this, now is the knowing. And then I'm emphasizing trying to sustain that. So notice that technique. What's happening is actually the same thing is happening. Uh, sensations in the mouth, let them be conscious. Notice the language I'm using and let it become conscious as opposed to what does your left tooth feel? Left tooth. There is no such thing as a left tooth, is there? What does your upper molar feel like? And or what does your lower gum feel like? That would be very much about the object, but just let it become conscious, just in awareness. So the attitude is relaxed attention, open attention, welcoming attention. Those are the kinds of things I'm trying to convey. And then you do a kind of refresh, like in a computer. You refresh the website, well, you go to the ears, right? But the thing, it's the same thing, it's same awareness. It's not a second awareness. And then you refresh it again with the nostrils, refresh it again with the eyes. So it's the same thing. So what happens? Hopefully, hopefully it works. You come back to the same conclusion. It's like this. The body changes, but you come back to a sense, okay, there is a background. There is an openness, there's consciousness, there is knowing. And you start to abide as that. Then when you have to work, then of course, if I go back into the workshop and I'm working with my chisels, I just will abide in awareness. Never get anything done. So I have to concentrate, to sharpen it, and so on. Um, but if all of our life is only about objects, right? About I like even study, there is a tendency, I think, to overstudy. Like as I think most of you know, when I first came to the monastery, Luangpor Cha said, "Don't read for 5 years." Oh, I want to read. No, he wasn't even, he didn't say don't read novels for 5 years. He said don't read anything, especially Buddhism. Why? Because we tend to get overly intellectual. There's a real tendency, and then we try to match our experiences to reality, and then we're always thinking. We're always analyzing. So one of the questions that came online was, when the mind is silent, should I contemplate the aggregates? No. Why do you want to think? Where's it going to get you? I mean, how many times has someone contemplated the aggregates? Probably a million times. What's the profit there? It's simply intellectual entertainment. It's consuming ideas. So you can consume gummy bears or you can consume ideas, but you're still out in the objects. So if we take, not that I'm against study, but I'm just cautioning against overstudy. The idea that knowledge itself will liberate you is not true, because knowledge itself is thought. I think what will liberate you is depth of study. So I'm just using the word nirodha, this retreat. And like you could say, well, nirodha means Arya Satya Nirodha means the noble truth of the cessation of suffering, which is the abandonment of craving. Good. You got an A. Very good. Next. And you get another idea. But that's no wisdom. That's just high school. Right? And who wants to do high school? But if you take if you take that word and you think about it for half a year, but not just think about it, you observe. Well, what would the end of suffering look like? And so I was just playing around. Well, maybe it would look like metta bhavana, or maybe it would look like karuna, or maybe it would look like upekha, or maybe it would look like anicca dukkha anatta. Or so you start to try to get some depth to these words through reflection and through observation. And that observation is actually quite silent. So you don't need much language. So the several questions online were about thinking. I would say really try to go to no thought. Can the mind be quiet? Is it possible for the mind to be quiet? What's the profit of always analyzing? If we take again Luangpor Sumedho's suggestion, it's like this. It's not a lot of language, but the language has a purpose, And the purpose is to bring us to silence, I would say, the silence of the way things are, or to Dhamma. Now, that's actually quite hard. It's quite hard because what happens if and we all of us are intellectuals, all of us study a lot, we read a lot, our analytical minds have been developed in terms of um, problem solving. We use computers a lot. So we're very heady beings, very much in the head and thought. And then quite often we'll create thinking problems and then just go off into analysis and thinking, is this vitaka or is this vijara? Or is this samasankapa? And how is and those are okay questions, but quite often they just dwell in the realm of thought. So to take one thought or to take one statement, it's like this, and then maybe that's sufficient if you have some understanding. So it seems to me the first understanding is, again, if I go back to what I was referring to earlier, that the khandhas are anicca dukkha anatta. All sense experience is unsatisfactory when you compare it to the Buddha's realization of the unconditioned. To me, that equation is enough to understand what the aggregates are about. The aggregates are about don't go there. Don't go to the khandhas, don't go to the salat, because you won't find the unconditioned in the conditioned. That's all you need to do, I think. So to spend a lot of time contemplating the aggregates or the khandhas, why? Just because the teacher says you should contemplate the what's the purpose? What's the point of the contemplation? And it seems the point of the contemplation is renunciation, or just knowing that in the khandhas you'll find joy and sorrow, you'll find sweet and sour, you'll find happiness and unhappiness, you'll find duality. Fine, okay, do the best you can. Have a nice meal and have a good rest and so on. But you won't find nibbana in the conditioned. So then it becomes very simple. Your question then is like, what's unconditioned, uncreated? And then you have to be silent because if you're thinking, you're in the conditioned. So if we take Luangpor Dun's formulation of another way of thinking of Nirodha, the mind going outside is the cause, samudaya. The result of the mind going outside, dukkha. Mind, knowing the mind is the path, magga. The result of the mind knowing the mind is the end of suffering, nirodha. So it's another way we get nirodha. Well, that's interesting. So then what could the mind knowing the mind? Now, if you try to figure that out, you'll just be in the mind going out, right? The mind going out is the problem. Okay, so if I'm thinking, the mind going out is the cause. So thought is something you go out into, isn't it? Although you think it's in your head, it's still something you go out into and you get reborn into it or whatever. So that can't be it because it's still the khandhas. You're still looking for the unconditioned and the conditioned. Or have you really contemplated that? Have you really contemplated this statement? There is the unconditioned, the uncreated, the unoriginated, have you really thought deeply about that? What that would imply? Akalika Dhamma. Have you thought deeply about what does that imply? Akalika Dhamma implies that it can't be tomorrow. That liberation cannot be in the next minute. In the next second, it cannot be a matter of time. So here and now Dhamma. And so how do you touch here and now Dhamma? It's like this. Best way to do it, I think. That was brilliant. It's like this. So what do you get from that? Well, you get nothing. You get no thing, no object. But what you get is awareness of Dhamma and hopefully silence. So I would suggest that, um, again, the question, can the mind be silent? Is it possible? Rather than Can I analyze my way into silence? No, I mean, I've given that a go. That doesn't work. So the renunciation of thought, but not the repression of thought. So the renunciation of thought for me is don't go there. The repression of thought, oh God, you're thinking again. Stop thinking. So if I say to myself, it's like this, and I listen, and it seems to me that's the path right there. The mind knowing the mind. That's the path. And then it's a matter of trust, and a matter of persistence and perseverance, because even though I can touch that, the habits of my conditioned mind are so powerful that I forget. So forgetting is the problem, not not you yourself. It's not like there's nothing wrong with us really. It's this forgetfulness that's the problem. And what is the forgetfulness? We forget awareness. So you could, and one of the mistakes I've made, and probably we've all made, we equate awareness with control. So when I started meditation, it was like anapanasati was about controlling my mind. Walking meditation is about controlling my mind. Stop thinking, stop the thinking, control, control, control. But that made me very unhappy, and it made me feel useless because I couldn't do it because the thinking mind had its own program. But when Luangpor Viradhammo started to say, well, okay, can you see the end of a thought? Can you see when a thought stops? Or can you just think a thought and then see the end of a thought? So I am Viradhammo. And notice the end of the thought. I am not Viradhammo. Same, the end. So what does the end of a thought feel like? It feels like this. It's not a thing, but it is a thing. So you start to approach the whole thinking mind not as an end in itself, but as an object to be let go of or to be used appropriately. How can you use it appropriately in meditation? I would say just little suggestions if you can. Poco, poco, just a little bit, not much. So it's more like coaching. It's like, you're sitting, because all of us have enough experience, I think, with thought. We don't really need to think that much. So just a suggestion. You can just like, as you're sitting, say, non-becoming, just that. And what does that suggestion do? It's right thought, but then that suggestion is around tanha, non-becoming. And then if you're trying to get somewhere, there it is, non-becoming or receptive. And to me, that's a really much more powerful use of language than analysis. And analysis is very good when you're planning a complex thing with 2,000 people in non. Then you really need complex thought. Great. But can we rest the mind? Is there a place for silence and resting? It is. It is. There is. So, in uh, we were talking uh, about Dhamma, honest, and we weren't gossiping, weren't we? It's true. And so we were talking about the kind of uh, two ways that Theravada quite often portrays the path of practice. One is the ways of attainment. So, in a Buddhist country, you get a lot of language about this Kubajan having those powers and having this attainment, and she's got that, and he has that, and it's all about. But what's the difference between that and owning a Lexus? Isn't it similar? Like, the Buddhist gossip that we have as a community. Oh, she's got 10th jhana. Wow. And whoa, he's an anagami. Whoa. But isn't it same? Well, he's got a Cadillac. Yeah. I mean, that's Buddhist gossip. You don't know. And so we knock these ideas around, and then of course we feel totally inferior because we don't have a Cadillac or a Lexus, or someone says they do, and they feel really, really proud and show off, right, and intimidate you with that. But that's just gossip, right? So I certainly there are attainments, and I have to be careful I get thrown out of Thailand. But as a cultural piece, it is, I think, Sila Paramasa. Luangpor Sumedho teaches Sila Paramasa very interesting. He says it's cultural attachment. You can see in a culture, in a Buddhist meditative culture, there is a tendency to kind of elevate mysterious beings or mysterious states of mind and then feel totally inferior for, oh, I'm just a lay person. It'll take me 10,000 years to get enlightened and so on, which is all, it's unskillful. Silapata paramasa. So when you see yourself doing that, that's a creation of mind. That's a creation of thought. And when you feel cultural pressures that way, or you sit down and actually then try to be this character now that's going to get all these attainments, that's bhava tanha, culturally conditioned. I have to get something, some experience. And then my first intention is fraught with attavada, filled with sila paramasa, sakaya ditti demti, and bhava tanha up to your eyeballs. So how can there be freedom when there's all that going on? The other way that I hope this doesn't get published. Uh, the other way that sometimes is an interesting way to think about practice is the ways of letting go. All right, and you can see I'm in more in that kind of pathway. But the ways of letting go, I think are kind of realistic approach to how your mind actually functions, things that you can see, rather than speculate about things that you can get or can't get. So what you can see is bhava tanha. You can see the tendency of trying to find something in your meditation. You can see yourself meditating and trying to get something. You can know that. You might get deluded by it, certainly, and get fooled by it, but at some point you'll feel tension and pressure, and you say, "Oh, I'm trying to get something," and you can let go of that. That's something you can do. You can see it, and so in that sense, would say it's santitiko. Something you can see for yourself, not something someone else says and approves or certifies you in that way. You can see repressive tendencies. So I always talk about my own problems with fear and social anxiety. I could see it took me a while. Luangpor Sumedho was coaching me, and he said the problem isn't the fear or the anxiety, it's the desire not to have the fear and anxiety. Now that's something which was realistic to my own suffering and my own attachments and the way I was conditioned. And he kept pointing out, no, 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 you have to welcome the fear. Why? Because you're trying to get rid of the fear. Now, that's something I could look into and I could eventually understand and work with. It wasn't speculative attainment, but what it did lead to was the liberation of fear from the mind, which is a real thing. It's not abstract, it's really real. And then the happiness that comes from that and the love that comes from that possibility because the mind's no longer fearful. That's something I could do. So that's based on tanha. There is the suffering, cause is attachment. No, no, the cause wasn't the fear. It was the attachment to the desire to get rid of the fear. And that's something I could look at. It wasn't speculative. So that to me is the pathway of letting go. Something that's to me, really realistic. You can do that. Now, certainly people have attainments and then they can talk about them realistically and encourage other people. But I'm just talking about that cultural piece where we get so intimidated or we think we have to get something. which is something different than genuine attainment that people have. Sakayaditi, personality view. What is that? Well, that you can let go of, and that is self-thinking. Um, I um, I shouldn't be this way. I shouldn't be so aggressive. Is is a thought. I can see that, and then I can see, oh, aggression feels this way. Now, when I say aggression feels this way, then I see aggression as dharma. And if I see it as dharma, then I can be patient with it until it ceases. If I say I shouldn't be aggressive, that's kayaditi, attavada. I am someone who shouldn't be this way. So what happened to anatta? Where did that go? Out the window. Huh? So I can let go of attavada. I can let go of sakayaditi and then be patient with, say, in this case, aggressive tendencies. Well, aggression feels this way. So the statement aggression feels this way is a statement of letting go of Sakayaditi, a personality view or ego view. To say it doesn't matter, aggression doesn't really matter, it's all not self, so I continue to be aggressive. That's not the path either, because that's still ego. I have a right to be aggressive, something like that. No, no, aggression is an object. So we're letting go of Sakayaditi. Huh? Silabata paramasa. I should attain something, or a bhikkhu should love solitude. Why? Maybe I don't love solitude. So the kind of cultural norms that people put upon us in a Buddhist society or in a conventional society, what I should be or shouldn't, what a man should be, what a woman should be, what an old person should be, etc., etc. And then doubt itself, like thinking, the abandon to letting go of thinking. Just like don't go there. That's very hard to do. Not repressing thinking, but the mind starts to create. Like for me, it's more like creativity. I like to design furniture and rugs. So I'll see I'll see a rug somewhere. Lately, that's what I've been into, weaving. So I'll see a rug. I'll think I saw a nice in Dhammaram, two Chinese rugs with, they call it, I think, the cloud pattern that goes around. Is it called cloud pattern? I thought, I could do that. Oh yeah, I could do that in blue. So then I sit down. No. And my mind wants to go to creativity. No, no, it's not. No, no, let go. I can sit down, put some graph paper and create something. That's fine. But no, I want to relax the mind. I want to learn how to relax the mind, pick that up. And I can do that. It's hard. It's hard. But so in letting go of something, you're relaxing the mind. And this is what you have to do if you have very, complex uh, projects. How do you rest the mind in complex projects? It's very hard because you put all that momentum into planning. So the planning mind comes up, but you can try. Say, yeah, yeah, but I think I won't go there. Yeah, yeah, but oh, no, it's like this. Planning is like this. So you're learning how to relax the mind, how to let go of attachments. So for me, the pathway of letting go has been much more doable and effective, but the letting go does have results because the kilesa, the defilements, the egotism, all of that begins to cease in the mind. One of the questions that came up with my confrères, is that how we say in French? Confrères, yeah. Um, my brothers, was the arising of negativity on a retreat. And I was reminded of like our early years at Wat Nana Cha, the first 2 years. And then if you read about Luangpor Viradhammo's early years as a samaner and as a monk, a lot of repressed angers and resentments came up. I certainly found that a lot of rage and kind of nothing to do with the social situation I was in, resentments coming up about things that I'd felt and hurt. And then Lompa Sumeda was he wasn't teaching it's like this, although he was in a sense, but one of the lines he said, consciousness is the escape hatch. And what does he mean by that? Well, when you let something become conscious and you know it as an object, not be the subject, you know it as an object, it manifests because its karma is to manifest. It stays for a while. It's very, very unpleasant, but eventually it ceases because that's its life form. It's like a life form that comes into consciousness. So he said, let things come up into consciousness. If you feel resentment, so resentment is like this, like have a welcoming attitude to it. And that was tremendously important for me with my fears. It was so helpful because my idea was I had to control fear, I had to repress fear, I had to get jhana, I had to get insight, I had to be a sotapatti. All that language of attainment was rattling around in my head and very intimidating. And here I was just full of fear and anger. Hopeless monk, hopeless monk. And Lompa Sumedho didn't say I'm a hopeless monk. He says, no, no, that's the karma of your mind. You can develop barami with this now. You can develop the barami of satipanya. You can develop the barami of metta towards the fear. You can develop the barami of insight around what is vibhava tanha, what is bhava tanha. This fear is your biggest teacher. And he was right. And I'm glad he said that, right? Because I thought it was my biggest enemy. But you think about it, the thing which causes you the most amount of dukkha, in unless it's like your neighbor, but the kind of internal stuff that we face, the most troubling thing is the strongest thing where the delusion of self takes place. And so you have to approach it. And in the approaching of it, you gain insight into the attachments of your character, the things that you suffer from. And that to me, it's a very doable kind of thing. And the results are good because the teaching around Nirodha is not a teaching of attainment, it's a teaching of letting go, the abandonment, the relinquishment of craving. Right? It is a teaching of letting go. So to me, that I've always been grateful for Lompo's emphasis on the Four Noble Truths because I suffer. and and I want to get free from suffering, and so it's very very kind of realistic that way. And then I must admit, Lompo Dun's entry into that formulation of forward has been fabulous. I really like that. Oh yeah, it's just the mind knowing the mind. It's just so very very simple. So approaching Nirodha in these different ways, and you maybe have your own ways, you can see how language doesn't have to be so, it doesn't have to be encyclopedic, but it has to have depth. And so we can use our intelligence in this kind of way, which has more depth to it. So just to finish, there was one question that I keep finding myself going to the breath or Buto. Is it okay to use these objects? Yeah. Whatever you're good with, do it. But I'm not emphasizing any particular technique. Do Buto. Thai say D's like T's and T's like D's. You say Buto, right? You say Puto, right? And I say Buto. Same, same idea. But if you're doing Buto, what are you doing? Are you just trying to suppress thought? Buto, Buto, Buto. Yeah, okay. Or are you saying it deliberately? Buto. And then abiding as knowing. Buto. Abiding as knowing. Then it's the same thing. It's like this. Pepsi Cola. Buto is a bit more inspiring. But you see what I mean? It's still the same principle of the awake mind. So whatever it might be, the breath or whatever you're used to, go for it. Just get really, really good at it. And there was another question about, which is not quite related, but why are Vinaya rules or so important to the holy life or to the life of a retreatant? It seems like with Dhamma alone is not enough. Well, because we need conventions, right? So the Buddha left us, didn't leave a we didn't have a Dharma heir, as it were. He didn't say, Venerable Ananda, you're in charge now. He said, I leave you Dhamma Vinaya. And as bhikkhus, we are very, very fortunate because we participate in Vinaya. In Vinaya is conventions. Everyone has Vinaya. You know, when you pay respects to your parents, that's Vinaya. When you clean your teeth, that's Vinaya. Really, we have dental hygiene. When you have an argument in the family and you sit down and you talk it through, you try to get a resolution. That's Vinaya. Um, when you put dietary restrictions on yourself for health reasons or whatever, that's Vinaya. When you um, communicate with each other according to the when you have a um, when you have a committee meeting in your work and you have an agenda and you have a chairperson and you stay to the agenda. That's Vinaya. So Vinaya are the etiquettes and rules of living a good life. And the thing about Vinaya for the bhikkhus is we surrender to this common agreement, and we've done that here. We've surrendered to a common agreement, and that's Vinaya. In ordinary life, then it's much more complicated because not everyone surrenders to the five precepts, right? So you're in business and you're working with someone who's a bandit. It's difficult. So then you have to have law. So rule of law is Vinaya. If you didn't have rule of law, not everyone's going to volunteer for the five precepts. So you have governance. You have rule of law. Hopefully you have rule of law. Hopefully you cut out corruption, etc., etc. But sometimes it's not so easy. So the more we can have good rule of law, good governance, good family communication, then we have a stable society. Stable society, we can practice Dhamma. The more corrupt our society is, the more. So if you have a corrupt Sangha, a Sangha which is not observing the rules, isn't interested in Nibbana, is only interested in material things, then that Sangha is not going to last, really. It's not going to be a very, very good Sangha. So Vinaya is just the natural social order, and we have a very particular social order that the Buddha recommended. So we're very lucky that way. But any society, any civil society has hopefully rule of law. When societies lose rule of law, when warlords rule, it's frightening. It's very, very frightening. When families are not compassionate and one figure, a parent, becomes authoritarian and abusive, it's a disaster, etc., etc. We could go on and on and on. But in terms of lay Vinaya, I think basically five precepts and living a responsible life where you do the maximum amount of good and the minimum amount of harm. That's pretty good. That's a kind of good standard. And I think this group does it. You do a lot of good work. You really try to keep the precepts. You really try to get time for meditation. Wonderful. Very inspiring. So I'll leave it there.